Calvin, if you can hear me, probably you can start talking about the next session with Prof. Joy Egbert.
Oh, okay. All right. So I can just start now. Okay. So selamat pagi Ibu Bapak dan rekan-rekan semuanya. So good morning everyone. So welcome to the second session of the webinar. So my name is Calvin and I'll be the moderator for this session. So in this session, we have our special guest speaker, Dr. Joy Egbert. So welcome, Joy. Yeah, so let me introduce her briefly. So Dr. Joy Egbert is a professor of ELL, English Language Learners and Education Technology at Washington State University, Pullman, the United States. And then Dr. Joy Egbert has been teaching for over 35 years, focusing on ELL education and education technology. And she has teaching and research experience from K-adult and has worked with teachers and ELLs in many countries around the world. So including Japan, China, Russia, Singapore, England, Macedonia, Taiwan, and hopefully soon in Indonesia. Joy. Okay. So she has researched and published widely and is an ESL specialist with the US State Department. And then in this session, Dr. Joy Egbert will share her insights on how to engage students in language learning with technology. And later on, if you have questions, feel free to type them in the chat box. And then we will try to respond to your questions at the end of Joy's presentation. And later on, you may also click the raise hand button to ask your question and interact directly with Dr. Joy Egbert. So Joy, I think you may start to share your slide now.
Okay, did I do it right?
Yes, okay, so, all right. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Joy Egbert. You may start, Joy.
Thank you for all for being here. And thank you, Calvin, for inviting me. And I need to say that we miss Calvin here where I am. And if you want to know where that is, here's a slide. Actually, I showed this to Calvin earlier and he's like, oh, I miss it. He doesn't miss it when there's snow on it like this. Actually, there isn't snow right now, but it's coming, we've been told. So today we're going to talk about, as Calvin said, how to engage students in language learning with technology. And a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about kind of echo what Dr. Healy said. So hopefully you're going to get that double dose. And those are the things that you should take as very important since we agree on them. The other thing I want to say is that I generally don't, or I almost never lecture in my classes. I don't like to. It's less engaging for me, I guess, but since this is the forum that we have, we'll do this. And then if you have an important question in the middle of when I'm talking, feel free to interrupt. Otherwise, I made this for 35 minutes so that we'll have time to talk about it afterwards. So I hope that works. So what we're going to talk about, or what I'm going to talk about today, is what I think is important to know about the theories and the background that ground call practice. So what do we have to know, or what should we think about as teachers, or what do I think about as a teacher when I use technology in my classes? So that'll be brief. Then I'm going to give you a general classroom application of a unit of technology enhanced engaging language and content tasks. And we're going to see how all of those things can be integrated. And then there'll be time for questions and discussion. So to start, I want to present, I always use this, this model of language learning, or this equation that Spolsky proposed in 1989. I know, I was alive at that time. A lot of you weren't, whatever. Don't brag. So this is a model of conditions for language learning. And the reason I think this is attractive or useful as a teacher is because we don't really know how languages are learned. We don't know the specific brain functions, that tie things together. So we have some ideas, and we're getting more all the time, but we can't really say, and as teachers, that research isn't as useful for us right now as some of these other ways to look at language learning. So what Spolsky said is that knowledge and skills in the future, that's KF, that means what students come out with or their outcomes or their gains, their achievements, are a result of knowledge in the present, so what they come to our classes with, their abilities, which they also come to our classes with, their motivation and affect, which teachers can barely, if ever, actually affect, and then opportunity. And here I'm stressing opportunity. The only thing in this model that teachers really can have a high impact on is what opportunities we offer our students. And the literature says that for those opportunities to be useful for students, they need to be engaging, because we know that the higher the task engagement, the more students achieve. Okay, there's a lot of, especially recent research, that confirms this relationship. So what is task engagement? This year in January in Teaching English, well, I don't remember the name of the journal, but I'll post it later. My research team and I posted this evidence-based model of task engagement. And so what it shows is that here are all the parts of the task. Actually, I can use an annotator. This is one of my favorite things. Okay, here's all the parts of the task. So it consists of everything from the topic to the resources used, to what the goals are, to what tools, what the outcome is supposed to be. And all of these language task elements can be imbued with these engagement facilitators. And in fact, that's what we're going to talk about today. These facilitators then can be part of the content, they can be part of the resources, and the more they're integrated into the language task, the more students are probably going to be, potentially going to be engaged, and the more they'll learn. So let's look a little bit closer just for a minute at these facilitators, because this is what teachers can do. So you can provide authentic opportunities to your students in their tasks. And the tasks should include authenticity. And this is one of the things that Deb talked about. Authenticity used to mean, when I learned about it in, last century in my master's program, it used to mean that, for example, a newspaper that was written for native speakers was authentic. This definition is now changed to mean what's authentic to the students. So what has relevance to their lives, what they see as valuable either for their life or for their learning. And so, for example, my students are interested in, say, graphic novels. So if I try to integrate graphic novels some way into some of my tasks, that's going to be, they're probably for sure going to be engaged in that way. That's just one example, and we'll have some other ones in a minute. Social interaction, we know this as a principle for language learning, but it's not interacting with the teacher, talking to the students and the students responding in kind of one-to-one back and forth. It's these other things, negotiation of meeting, interaction where they're talking about the topic or they're talking about the goals of the task. So it has to be meaningful social interaction. And that can be integrated in tasks in many, many ways. The third important facilitator is interest. And students have different kinds of interests. One of them is personal. So it's an interest that you have for a long time. So I've been interested in technology for many years. We're not going to talk about how many. And then situational interest, which just is interest that just comes in an instant, that they see something and they're interested in it. So teachers can integrate both situational and personal interest into call-based tasks. Fourth, an engaging task is one that has enough learning support for students. This means feedback from the teacher and peers. It means resources that are available, at the click of a finger. So this is one of the things that bothers me. This is an aside. lots of teachers in the United States, when students come into the classroom, make the students put their phones aside, put them in high schools, they're in kind of cubby-like things. In colleges, they're often asked to put them in their backpacks and zip them up. And I'm exactly the opposite. I ask the students to have their devices ready on their desks so that if they have a question or if I have a question, they'll have instant access to the information that they need to keep going with the task, and they won't have to stop because they don't have the support they need. And that's called just-in-time feedback or just-in-time resources. And that's the most important kind of learning support, according to the literature. Autonomy is an important facilitator, and it varies by culture and by students. Some students don't want a lot of autonomy. They work better when there's a lot of structure. Other students say, just tell me what the end is, what I need to do, and I'll figure out how to do it myself. So teachers can use this engagement autonomy facilitator to engage students by providing choices and maybe structuring those choices. Here, there are 3 choices. This is what they are. Now you can pick. So that might be a good way to try to engage a lot of students. And then finally, the facilitator of challenge. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, based on his research on the theory of flow, he came up with the idea of theory of flow, which says that if students are not challenged enough, they'll be bored. And bored students are unengaged or disengaged. If the challenge of the task is too difficult, then students will be, they'll feel like they can't get it done, and they'll also disengage. So there has to be a balance between students' skills and the difficulty of the task. Let's think about that for a minute. That means in my classroom, if I have 65 language learners who are at all different levels of skill on a certain, for example, some of them know past tense extremely well. They can use it perfectly. And some of them really don't have a grasp of it. How am I supposed to deal with those skill levels? And I'm going to give you some examples of what we can do about that in a minute. So these are the important facilitators, and let's see what that might look like in our classrooms. So this is a picture, obviously, of engaged language learners. You can tell because one of the indicators is that they smile, that they look like they're excited or having fun with the task. Of course, that's saying that they're looking at the task or doing the task. I don't know, they could be doing something else on their computer, but anyway, this is how it should look. And then here's the opposite. And I hope most of us don't see this on a regular basis, but it happens. And you can see that this student has, I don't know what, it looks like he's reading a poem or maybe the encyclopedia or something, but obviously he's very disengaged from it. So that leads to the question, what engages your students? Some students, in fact, will engage with drills, like Deb said, and should engage with drills because they learn well from them. Others need to have this kind of interaction that you see on the right-hand side. They'd rather do tasks that they can do with other people and that have other of the engagement facilitators in them. Do you see anyone you recognize in these pictures? Okay, so the first 2 things we talked about briefly are language learning and how opportunities are important. And second, that there are task engagement facilitators that can be integrated into the opportunities to help students engage. And the third component of this kind of framework is technology use. And my guidelines are somewhat the same as the ones that Deb told you. And you can find lots of different ideas in the literature about technology use, but these are the ones that I think are important. Like Deb, don't use it if it's not necessary. And my take's a little bit different on this. For example, we have a history professor here at WSU that people come from all around, from the community, to watch his lectures because he is a phenomenal lecturer. He does not need slides. He does not need any other kind of technology because he knows how to engage students. So that's an extreme example, but sometimes teachers tend to use technology because it's there, and that's not a good reason. Second, again, use applications that can support many tasks. For example, and this goes with what Deb said about you don't have to know everything, you can't know everything. But if you want to use technology regularly to engage your students, for example, Google Docs or Office, all the things that you can do with a word processor. I mean, there are hundreds, maybe thousands of things I can think of, from story writing to sharing feedback on grammar to all kinds of things. So my advice is to, be kind to yourself and use apps that you can use for many things. My advice to myself is always use apps that are accessible, especially to students. I can say I rarely, if ever, use anything I have to pay for, because I can find something like it for free somewhere on the internet. And if I don't know where to find it, I can ask somebody. Also, these apps should be able to be used on Android or Mac OS or whatever the students have, so that you don't have to use, I used to use 2 different video programs, because some of my students had PCs or tablets, Android tablets or Google tablets, and some of my students had Macintosh or Apple. Or even if the students know the app, that you have backup, you have resources that students can use who don't know how to use it, that there are tutorials, YouTube videos. Sometimes the apps come with help where they say, click this button to do this. So whatever it is, there should be that opportunity for learning support or feedback with whatever app you decide to use. And then finally, I have to say that I have gotten most of my suggestions for these kind of apps that are free, they have tutorials, they can support a lot of things, from my students, because they're online a lot more than I am. So sometimes I ask and say, what do you guys know that will do this? We need something that will do this. And they generally know something or can find something very quickly. Okay, so that's the end of the kind of theoretical part. If you have a question, yes, Kelvin is everywhere. Go ahead and throw it in. Otherwise, I'm going to move on to a unit that I put together to help demonstrate these 3 kind of theoretical underpinnings and how they work together. So let's say that I'm doing a unit with my ESL students or my English language learners, learning about the news. This is particularly important for older students these days, since they pay so much attention to the news. So my goals for this unit, so the whole unit, and there'll be individual lessons and tasks integrated into the unit, are that there are content goals like retelling the news and being able to write in newspaper format, grammar goals such as using adjectives correctly, using simple tenses, etc., collaboration skills, and then also technology skills. So we can't forget that when students are using technology, they're also learning information literacy, technology literacy, sometimes media literacy. So it's important to include those in our goals and objectives. So in my unit, the first technology I'm going to use is my absolute favorite, suggested by a student, called Pixton. And the first thing that students are going to do is go into the class that I built for them in Pixton. It just has their names there. And they are going to build an avatar that looks like them to be in the class picture. So they go in and they choose if they want to be female or male. Yes, I think those are the only 2 choices. They can choose hair, different colors, skin colors, different clothes. Even there's a wheelchair and some other things for differently able learners. And then when they submit their picture, it goes not only just, to where the pictures are saved, but it goes directly into this class picture. So you can see that I'm on the right here. And one of my students has his hand kind of in my nose for some reason. I must have had a runny nose that day. I'm not sure what. Anyway, by the way, Pixton also has information for teaching English language learning with comics. It gives all kinds of ideas there that students can use. And you can see on the left-hand side, it does 21st century thinking skills, and there are lessons for grade levels. So it's a really nice little tool. Most of it's free. If you want advanced characters to use, then you'll have to pay, but that's just one of those things. So by using Pixton, these are the things that are happening in my class. We're community building, we're showing that we're a group, giving students ownership over what they build. Students love this program. It's super fun. And even students who have classes with me a second or a third or a fourth time really enjoy making the class picture. Again, they're learning tech skills. They have instant feedback from their peers. And also when they click submit, if it doesn't work and it doesn't look like they want it to, then they can try it again. And I could, even if I wanted to, use Pixton to develop cartoons that would present some of the language skills or help students review or even test their language skills. So it's a really useful multi-use program. And the facilitators, the engagement facilitators that it helps me integrate into this task are all of these. For example, students are really interested. They love this program. They talk about it. It provides feedback. So if they click on something wrong, it will ask them and help them get back to where they were. They have the autonomy to make their characters like they want them to be. It's not very challenging. It's something that they haven't done before, but there's enough support that it's a perfect balance for them to be able to figure out what's going on there. So that's my first. Then I'm going to use that group picture, the class picture as we call it, and put it on the front page of my LMS. So I use Canvas, free for teachers. Note the name, free. It's very, I think, very natural way to organize my units within my class, and I can put everything that students need here, including pictures, articles, all kinds of other information. So that means that for this LMS, I'll have a calendar in there so students will be able to know what's due. They'll have clear guidelines. So that's part of the kind of autonomy and structure balance for them. They'll know what the goals are. There are sharing tools such as chat, collaboration, and discussion in the LMS that I can use. And again, this helps me integrate a lot of the facilitators into all of the tasks that I'm going to do in this unit or in this class, especially providing learning support. Anything they need, they can go find in the LMS. They can interact there, and they can find things that are interesting, and they can use some of the things I post there on their own without me having to say, go do this. So there's all these engaging possibilities. My next technology that I'm going to use, Deb talked about it, and some people talked about it in the chat. Kahoot, and a lot of people think Kahoot is just a quiz program, but it's not. There are lots of, even Kahoot says there are lots of different things that it can be used for, including spelling practice and those kind of things. And the thing I like about Kahoot is that I can, let me erase that, that I can include pictures and videos and all kinds of media to ask students about. So in my Learning the News unit, what I'm going to do is ask them what they know about newspapers. I'm going to ask them what they're interested to know or what kind of news they're interested in. I'm going to assess the language that they're going to need to use for the unit. And I can do that all in one Kahoot. If I wanted to, I could also preview the task using Kahoot, showing a video, asking them what they see there, telling them we're going to do more of this. I can use it for assessment of the task later, although I'm going to use something else in this unit. I can have learners make assessments with it, and I can also prepare some and put them in the LMS so that students can have independent and group practice where I see that they need a little bit of extra information. So if you think about it, Kahoot can help me integrate all of these engagement facilitators into my task. Let me see, there's a question here. I can't scroll. Okay, hold on. Okay, so what I want to make really clear here is that it's, and Deb said, and I'll repeat again later, that it's not about the technology. If you want to use technology well, there are 6 engagement factors, which when you understand them and use them over and over, they'll become automatic to you. And those are the things that you'll integrate into your tasks. So it's not TPACK, it's not, you know, any other kind of particular way of looking at it, except for that you know that you need to engage your students, and whatever engages them, and you know them, so you know what it is, you can use those 6 facilitators and integrate them as much as possible into your tasks. And then you'll find out not only more about your learners' task engagement, but you'll be able to use those to kind of think about everything you do in your classroom. That's my hope. That's what I do. Okay, again, take what's useful from this presentation for you, what you can use, what you find interesting, and then the rest is for somebody else. That's fine too. Okay, so now we've got everything in the LMS. The students have made their class picture. We've done a Kahoot, so I know what they know about newspapers, about news, what they're interested in learning about, and what language they already have. So now we're going to go to another app that Deb mentioned, Breaking News English. I also use Newsela, which is a little more formal. And in most versions, you have to pay for it if you want the whole broad content from Newsela. So, but either way, the important thing is both of these apps have news, really current news, and they both provide different levels of readings. So for example, in that huge 65 student class I have that's called Intermediate English, some of the students are going to be reading at a level 1, and some of the students are going to be reading at a level 5. For me, what's important is that they understand the ideas and they have the basic grammar and vocabulary that they can share when they're talking in groups. And these multi-level apps allow students to do that, to read at their own level, to understand the vocabulary in ways that they can, and then to share it with the broader class and know what's going on. If you haven't used it, Breaking News English also has kind of all this vocabulary and spelling and grammar exercises, and those can be assigned for different levels, as you can see. And the teacher can assign some or none, or say, students, you know what you need to do. Go pick some of these that you want to use. So again, I can use Breaking News English or Newsela to help students understand the latest news content, so it's authentic, it's up to date, to model news reports, which either could be interesting or authentic because students need to know those to complete this unit, help them understand and learn relevant language skills, help them understand in groups kind of what's going on in the groups they're going to be using, and then also expose them to grammar and vocabulary study, either that they need individually or as a whole group. And the way I look at it, and the reason I've chosen that, is because it helps me meet all of these facilitators. Check it. Okay, I don't know what time it is, so if I'm getting close, tell me, okay? So now that we've kind of introduced the news, the content, how it works, and read some interesting news, we're going to use my second favorite app, which is Padlet, which is also free. And Padlet is something that's really hard to find. It's gallery software. And that means that every student in the class can post their thing, whatever it is, a picture, part of an essay, an opinion, and their peers can respond. Okay, so I could have every essay in the class, or I could have every feedback from somebody in the class, or I could have a picture that somebody in the class posts to show a picture of an abstract word like love or essentialism or whatever word you want to have. So here I'm going to have, for my newspaper learning unit, I'm going to have my students post either the first paragraph of a news report, or I'm going to have them discuss what they think is interesting in the latest news. Okay. The cool thing about Padlet, again, like Kahoot, they can record themselves so that there's oral postings and they can respond orally to their peer. They can take pictures, they can upload videos, whatever it needs to be. And of course, I'll give them some structure instead of letting them choose whatever it is probably, but the opportunities are here for all of those things to happen. So Padlet's another app that can be used for a lot of different things. And that's why one of the reasons I like it so much. So we're going to use it in this lesson about learning the news to share ideas, to have each other react to ideas, to brainstorm about what stories they might want to put in a newspaper that they're writing, to write stories together, and they can even check each other's grammar. And there are, of course, many other uses. It just, depends on what you want to use it for. And again, when I'm thinking about which facilitators, this helps me integrate into my learning the news unit or task. I think that it does all of them. Okay, so finally, we've kind of done all the preliminary work, and I have the students go onto whatever search engine they're allowed to use and find something about news story format in a form that they can read. So some of them will have these very complicated, high-level explanations of what the news, a news story format is, and some of them will be this simple, that asks the questions, shows how to put the article together. Then I'm going to pick one of these or a different Office suite. OpenOffice is free. It's available on all platforms. Google Docs is also free, not available everywhere. And then MS Office Suite is terribly expensive unless you can get it free in some way. So I usually use Google Docs for my class. And I'll have my students use the Google Doc to write a newspaper article, share their ideas. There's a Grammarly plugin. Grammarly is also free. It allows for citation checking, proofreading, spell checking, all kinds of other things. So if you haven't plugged in Grammarly to Google or to your Microsoft Office, that's something that you probably want to do right away. Also using Google Docs, I can see everything that all of the students are writing all the time, give feedback at any time, and students can give it to each other if they're working collaboratively. They're working on technology skills, again, that writing a document in an Office program requires, and others, if I say, okay, make sure you insert a picture or whatever it is. And the main thing, of course, is storage. They will never lose their articles, and they will have no excuse. They can't say my dog ate it. Well, they could say my dog ate my laptop, I guess. But it's less likely that they won't have the work when they need to have it. And again, this helps me help them interact socially, write what they want to write about, whatever their interest is, provide them directly with support right when they need it in their Google Doc or in their Google Drive, and then provide them with a challenge to write what they can and use technology in the ways they can. And then autonomy, again, is part of the authenticity. Okay, finally, what I'm going to do is after they've written and published their news articles, I'm going to have the students go to a free OpenShot editor, a very strong but simple to use video editor that is available on at least the main platforms, the main OSs, and they are going to prepare to do a news report. So I'm integrating speaking and listening into what has been a lot of writing and social interaction, so a more formal way for them to speak and listen. And the cool thing about OpenShot Editor or any editing program is, one, it has green screen capabilities, so they can have whatever background they want, giving them autonomy and choice. They can record, and if they don't like it, they can go back and record it again. So they'll have instant feedback looking at themselves. It'll be authentic because they'll be able to put forward their work in the ways that they want to, and etc. Okay. And again, it really means OpenShot Editor can help me support all the facilitators of task engagement for my students. So in between here, I'm going to use something like this, and Deb pointed out some of these drills for students who like to do kind of quizzes to get instant feedback again, or do crossword puzzles to help with their vocabulary, help with the grammar that they need to use. So I'll assign these kind of on the side saying, well, I've been looking over all these things you've been doing. It looks like your past tense isn't really where you want it to be. So how about checking out some of these grammar quizzes that are posted in the learning management system in Canvas, in a specific place. So go pick the ones you want to do and work on those. And finally, at the end of the session, when we've done all the grammar, we've done all the vocabulary, students have written, they've produced their news show, I'm going to use jeopardylabs.com. I don't know how many of you know what Jeopardy is, but it's a really popular game show in the United States, and Jeopardy Labs is free. By the way, there's lots of other things in this area here in Jeopardy Labs, and I can add questions from simple to more complicated or more difficult in whatever categories I want to, or I can have students do so and then play it with each other. And then students, when they play, can choose if they want an easy question and what category they want to play from. So they'll have more confidence in answering the questions that they've chosen. So I want you to think for a sec, I'll give you a minute here, what the uses of Jeopardy Labs what other uses could there be in my unit or in your classroom, and what facilitators it could help you meet. Go ahead and think about that for a minute. Yeah, lots of them. Especially my students love to make their own Jeopardies and quiz each other. So, okay. Finally, so my unit's done. It was very successful. Students were very engaged most of the time, not all of the time, not all of the students. But there are other apps that I could consider using that I can really think of easy ways to help engage my students knowing about them. So here's some of them. Okay, and I want to say, write this down. There's one called gather.town, and it's a free simulation, and it's so cool. You can have conversations in different parts of especially if you're teaching online, you can have conversations in different parts of the classroom that you make or the building that you make. And students can't hear each other. It's just, it's one of the new things. It's really cool. Okay, let's end here by letting me just remind myself and you of a couple of things. So again, not every student will be engaged in every task all the time. But if you try to integrate the engagement facilitators to the best of your ability, at least using students' interest or using what students think is authentic, you're more likely to engage your students and they're more likely to learn. And Deb said this too, language use and knowledge, and I would call that content knowledge, are equally important, but not in every situation. Sometimes students really need to focus on whatever grammar they're going to be using for something, and they can find that authentic. If you say, if you can't use this, whatever it is, past imperfect, subjunctive tense, no such thing, but you won't be able to travel, or you won't be able to accomplish this goal that you want. So sometimes it's not about content. Sometimes it is just about the language. Again, tests should use the technology that is most appropriate for the context. So if you can't access Padlet or Google Docs, there are other things that you can access that can do the same things. And you can look on the web, of course, to find things, or ask people like Deb and I, or Deb and me, who know lots of different apps, or ask your students even. Okay, remember that, so even if I was going to use one of those drill apps that I showed you a minute ago, or have students go and do one of the quizzes, I can make social interaction around that by saying, talk about it together and then put the answer, or put your answer separately talk about them, and then check it online. So there are lots of ways to use even the simplest technologies or apps to engage students. So keep that in mind if you're despairing of all the high-end kind of technologies that you don't have or you don't have access to. And then the important point that Deb made, no technology should be the focus. It's how you use it that should be the focus of your teaching. And that's how you'll use to engage students. Okay, last slide. Some of you know about this already. These books are free. They're open education resources. They're previously published by commercial publishers, but they've been updated and made into open education resources now. So feel free to check those for other ideas and tasks and ideas about critical thinking and other kinds of technologies. Done.
All right. So thank you very much, Joy. So everyone, could you please share or give the digital claps for Dr. Egbert?
Oh, thank you.
All right. All right. Yeah, so we have around 15 minutes to do this question and discussion session. If you have, once again, you have questions, then you can type your questions in the chat box. And then if you want to ask the questions directly, feel free to click the share raise hand button and you can just ask your questions directly to Joy. Okay. So Joy, previously, that's the question from Ibu Maria from Riau University in Indonesia. So Ibu Maria, do you want to respond to Joy's answer about the TPACK that you asked previously? Yeah, Ibu Maria, I think you can.
Okay, thank
okay.
you, Pak Calvin, and also Dr. Egbert here. Thank you for the chance today. I think the term of, I refer to the term nowadays about TPACK, if I'm not mistaken. The term is very popular for our 21st century for educational system. So I'm very lucky you're very expert about this also. So in some areas, it's not, I'm living in the city, that's okay. I can implement for this TPACK, but how about your opinion? How can we switch for this domain to our teacher in the remote area, for example? Okay, that's my response about the question, please. Thank you, Pak Calvin. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, I can express actually another idea too. Yes. My thinking, and I've been in this field so long, is to not get too attached to some term or some kind of method that's going to change or that doesn't really mean anything, like constructivism, right? It's a general term that everyone understands differently, doesn't give you any real instructions about how to do things. And it's the same as when we talked about for ESL, like Suggestopedia or some of those other methods. I would say, take what you can use, what's interesting to you, and focus more on those specific things that research shows have a direct impact on your class, like presenting students with things they're interested in, like this task engagement model that, it doesn't claim to be a method. It can be used, in any classroom. So instead of saying, yes, I'm focusing on TPACK, say, what I'm doing is engaging my students so they'll learn, because that's our goal. That's our end goal. And that's really, in my thinking, all that we need. So I used to, when I started in this field, try all those different, what's the one with the little bars that you used to move? Well, I can't remember. So all these methods came away and then they left. And what they had in common is that we wanted to focus on students learning as effectively as they can. And in the literature, it shows that engaging students is the most effective way to help them learn. So engagement is part of TPACK. It's part of a lot of different theories, situated learning theory, attribution theory, as Calvin knows, mindset theory. It's kind of all kind of brought together by looking at these engagement facilitators. So my advice would be, don't get caught up in the latest fad or what other people say you should be doing. Oh, you should be doing TPACK. Think about what really matters for you and for your students. The other thing is, when your students are engaged, you are more likely to be engaged in teaching. On the converse, when you're more engaged, your students will be more engaged. So if you're using apps and looking at topics that you're interested in, then they're more likely to be engaged too. I had someone tell me yesterday or the day before, oh my gosh, I have taught this grammar class for 6 years now. I cannot do it anymore.
Yes.
Well, okay, how engaged are your students in it, and how engaged are you in it? Have you thought about, making it more interesting for everybody? And there's so many ways to do that. That's my long answer to the short question.
Okay, thank you for the good idea. I can catch the idea now. Thank you.
Okay, so Joy, so basically don't get trapped with the term, Joy. So TPACK or any other terms.
Mhm.
So focus on what works in what works for our students, yeah, to make
Yep.
them like learn and engage in our classroom.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, we have another question, Joy, from Ibu Yuli Ardini Tias Sri Yulianti from Makassar, Joy. So could you please share more
yeah.
cool ways to use Padlet? Thank you.
Okay, how many do you want? How much do we have time for?
We have 10 minutes, Joy.
Okay, so if you really want to know, I can think of an endless list of ways to use Padlet. Okay, so for example, first day of class, students take a picture of themselves if they're allowed to, post it, put a couple sentences about themselves, and then the students all talk to each other to introduce themselves. Have you ever done this? Blah, 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 blah. Second day of class, students post, are the teachers going through vocabulary, and people say, well, I don't get what that is. Post a picture of it. Everyone can agree on what's the best representation of that word. Or for media literacy, the teacher can post pictures or have each student go out and post a picture and ask students whether it's real or not real. So cool. There's so many places online to find those things, and students need to know what's real and what's not real. You could play truth or not truth. You could play, they could post parts of their essays, post the introduction to your essay, and other people make sure that they have the 5 components, that need to be in the essay, the purpose, etc. Or post a movie clip. Everybody post a movie clip that demonstrates the use of the word into, because we're having a hard time with prepositions. Okay, and then underneath underneath the clips that students post, students write sentences about it using the word into. Anything that you want your students to do together to look at each other's stuff all at once, you can put into Padlet. So everybody post a sentence using past tense, and we're going to check your grammar. Everybody record your pronunciation of these 10 words. Okay, and we're going to tell you how your pronunciation is. Some classes that won't work because there's not enough community where they won't be scared, but anyways, it's a possibility. So it's, endless.
Thank you, Joy. Hopefully it answers your question, Ibu Yuli.
Oh, you could keep a dictionary, a class dictionary. When you come across a word that you don't understand in your reading, sorry, now you got me all engaged in this idea, post it to the Padlet so that it's available for everybody else in case they run across that word too. Cool.
Okay. All right. Do you have any more questions, audience? We still have time. Yeah, we have another question, Joy, from Eka Sugeng Aryadi. Do we need to access our students' engagement and give them score and report it to their parents?
No. And you can do that. I do that. I don't report it to their parents, but I do assess their engagement consistently, just so I know. And one of the ways you'll know that your students are engaged is because their achievement across the board will be higher. So when their scores get better, you'll know that they're engaged. And so you don't need an additional assessment for that unless you're interested in it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Joy. Joy, so talking a little bit about the task engagement facilitators, Joy. So how do you integrate those facilitators? I mean, should we like have all of those facilitators in our like classroom or activities, or?
Okay, let me go back there for a sec.
Yeah.
That's a really good question, and one that people often ask. And the point is that you can't, right? It would be really hard. Well, especially when you're starting out. So my advice would be take one task that you do with your students, that's a general task on a topic that they have to have in the classroom, and see how many of these facilitators you can put into that one task. In the literature, it actually says that the three most important are authenticity, social interaction, and interest. So I would even start with those three and say, how can I make this interesting? What can I do to help students see it as authentic? And sometimes that's as simple as saying, you will need this to pass the test, or you will need this to go to America and study as a graduate student, or you need to understand this to do the next fun thing we're going to do in class, right? So my advice is, so the answer to your question is no. It's hard to put all of these things in all of the task areas that were in the, hold on. So here's all the task areas, the content, the topic. So even picking, say, okay, I'm going to make my content in this task interesting. Okay, pick one facilitator, put it in one part of the task, and see how it goes. And then little by little, make it better, add something else.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, Joy, thank you. All right.
I have to say it's taken me 20 years to actually come to this conclusion of, these are facilitators, because they've been developed slowly in the literature, but also to figure out, to make them automatic in my mind so that I can say, okay, here's a way to do this task that's going to engage these students. So it takes some time, it takes some thought, but boy, it's worth it when you see the glow in your students' eyes when they're doing those kind of tasks. And when you see Cal with this look on his face.
I know that student, yeah. All right. Okay, so thank you, Joy. Yeah, by the way, for information, I think if you want to read Dr. Joy Egbert published article about task engagement, I think we can find one that is accessible in Internet, Joy. So you can basically just type Dr. Joy Egbert and task engagement, like in bracket PDF, then you will find some of her publications on
TESOL EJ.
TESOL EJ, yeah.
Yeah.
TESOL EJ, yeah.
Yeah.
Joy, I think this is one last question.
Okay.
This is from Pak Toar Sumako. So this pandemic has taught us the many benefits of technology in language learning. So online learning is good. So going back to face-to-face meetings is actually a drawback. What do you think, Joy?
In some respects, I agree. In others, so students are different. Some students learn better face-to-face because of the affordances of the, interpersonal classroom, and some of them prefer to learn online, and so maybe learn better online. I don't have a problem when I use task engagement as my kind of theoretical foundation for teaching. I don't have a problem online or offline. So to me, it's all the same. However students want to study, or however we're allowed to study, is fine. I think that there are problems or challenges to integrating technology into every classroom, especially when you're face-to-face. Everyone has to have a device. Well, not always, but generally there need to be, devices available. They need to have good internet, all kinds of other things. So there's a lot of choices. And then some teachers just refuse to learn how to teach well online. They do what they do in their face-to-face classes, which doesn't necessarily work online. So it's a worse situation for a lot of students. And we found that in the States, this last year and a half or 2 years, that some students are just completely left out of online learning. So it depends on a lot of factors. I don't mind teaching online, especially when everyone's online. So we'll see what the research says in the next year or the next 2 years about what happened, with during the COVID epidemic.
Okay. So, all right. So thank you very much, Dr. Egbert, for your insightful presentation. We believe that we learned a lot from your presentation. And later on, if you have questions, feel free to contact Dr. Egbert.
Absolutely.
At her, you can contact her through her email. Okay. And then recordings of this session will be available on our YouTube, FBS YouTube. So later on you can check our YouTube, yeah, FBS UKSW. Okay. So Joy, once again, thank you very much. And
thank you.
We'll see you when we see you. Okay. So see you and stay healthy, Joy.
Hopefully soon.
Say
You
hi to
too.
all
Take
Professor
care.
and the other
Thank
people.
you.
Thank you, Joy.
Bye.
Thank you. Okay, so Ibu Bapak, so that's the end of our second webinar session. And after this, we'll have the next agenda, which is the workshop session. And then you can join. We have 10 workshop sessions, and you can join the workshop session in the breakout room. If you click the breakout room button there, you can see yeah, some rooms there. Okay. Okay, and you can just join the breakout room and enjoy the workshop session. So thank you very much. My name is Calvin, and that's the end of second webinar. So thank you. Have a good day.